Adventure Ho Illumineers, and welcome back to another episode of The Ducktail Dads. I am one of your hosts, Nathaniel. I am joined today by Mac and Ernie. Sadly, no Ryan. So for the second consecutive week, we are down one duck, unfortunately, but we are very happy to have Ernie on. So Ernie, thank you so much for joining. Welcome to the pod again.
Thank you again. Glad to be back.
Yeah, it's good to have some guests on. We obviously, Ernie, you're one of our favorites, having appeared on the podcast multiple times. Excited to talk to you as we turn the page from Infinity Weekend and turn the page to Set Champs coming up just around the corner. So before we get into any of that, we got to do our opening segment, as always. What is new in your world? So let's start with Ernie. Let's start with you. What is new in your world, man?
Yeah. So from a personal perspective, so my daughter, my youngest daughter, Elizabeth, who I've talked to about on this podcast in the past, she's a scout. So uh, they used to be called the Boy Scouts. They're called Scouts now. They allow girls to be in them. So she's a scout. And whenever you ask her if she sells cookies, she gets really upset. She's like, "I'm not that type of scout. I'm a real scout," is what she says. It's pretty cute. Um, but her and my wife is the patrol leader for their troop. So they were both gone. My son's in college in Madison, and my daughter works a lot. So I was pretty much by myself the entire weekend. So it was a lot of just that. I didn't know what to do with myself, to be honest with you. And there were some events, so that kept me a little busy. But otherwise, I was kind of watching old TV programs and things on streaming device. So that's what I did from a personal perspective. And then from Lorcana, as you know, is Infinity Weekend. So I was able to go to two events, VB Games and the one at Issue Needed Comics. So we can talk about that, I think, later in the show as far as Infinity. So
Nice. Glad to hear that you got out to at least one event. Not even better, you got to two. Mac, what's new in your world?
It's been an eventful last week for me, for sure. Roller coaster ride in my household. Reason I didn't join, I think you alluded to it last week. Me and my two boys got slapped with the flu. We officially got diagnosed with the flu. It had started for my boys the weekend before, and it hit me starting Monday, just before we were going to record. I think I texted you too, Nathaniel, about 20 minutes before we were scheduled to come on, and I'm like, I need to go to bed and work this off. I woke up the next morning and I ref basketball in the winter season. So I was like, okay, I'm feeling okay. So I went to ref basketball that night and my body was not ready for that. Come waking up Wednesday, out cold, I was sleepy. I slept all day. Trying to recover because Thursday was very much the high of my week, or one of the highs, but I would say the definite peak. Thursday was officially the day of our adoption finalization at the courthouse. So that happened on Thursday. Both boys, they were thankfully a day ahead of me with the sickness, so they were doing much better than I was, but it was only a half an hour. Got through it, had some lunch with all the family that attended, and I went straight back to bed as soon as we got home. But it's been 6 months of kind of trucking along, trying to go through this adoption process, and we just have a couple more paperwork things now. Imagine those of you who have gotten married. Once you get married, there are a couple more steps in, like especially name changes and social security cards and stuff. So that's the last bit of things we need to do for our now oldest official son of our family. Then Friday, made it to work on starting to get on the mend. And then this past weekend, for those of you on video, I'm representing my Vikings gear because my brother and my dad and I traveled to Dallas and we watched the Vikings game in person, Sunday Night Football. So we took a little trip this past weekend to go see Sunday Night Football. This is our 5th game that the three of us have attended a road game. And we do one road game every year, and this weekend happened to be it. A little unfortunate that it ended up lining up with Infinity Weekend, so I did not attend any Infinity events at all. However, with me having some decent success in Milwaukee, I felt okay. So Milwaukee was able to kind of take the cake when it comes to merging both of those two events. But yeah, the Vikings game was awesome. Dallas put on a really good show. And I flew in this morning. So I'm here. Now I'm back. I'm healthy. and I'm ready to go and start getting back into the Lorcana scene. So I'm just kind of here this episode to just hear how everything went and what you guys have come to know with this new Whispers meta as I'm trying to play catch up as Set Champs is, oh boy, 3 weeks, 3 weeks away. So I need
Mac,
to get, yeah.
quick question for you. What'd you think about Cowboy Stadium?
It is amazing. For those of you who know a little bit about football, it's Dallas is kind of like the big show in the NFL. They want to be the spotlight in everything, and the stadium definitely showcases that. It is. I go to a fair number of home Vikings games here in the Twin Cities, and it is 20 to 30,000 more seats than US Bank Stadium here. For those of you who have attended there, my brother and I actually went up to the very top, and it was a little overwhelming to just see how big the stadium was and how big that atmosphere was. But like I said before, they put on a fantastic show. They have something going on during every timeout. They have music going on between every play. Everyone's into it. So, I can see why the Star tends to shine quite bright in Dallas, but the stadium's fantastic. I had a blast.
So the when I went to the stadium, I found myself watching the big screen instead of watching the field. Did you do that also, or were you paying attention to actual field?
Yeah, so thankfully we weren't in like the way nosebleeds. We were kind of in the middle sections. So like if you looked at the screen too long, your neck would hurt. So it kind of forced you to look at the field. And thankfully we were on more of the side of the field where a lot of the touchdowns and action was happening. So it made for watching the field a little bit easier. But yeah, I can see what you mean. That screen is, I think it's bigger than an NBA basketball court by like, I don't know, 30 to 40 feet. It's crazy how big that screen is. But yeah, it's crazy, and it was a definite blast. So that is new in my world. Is nothing Lorcana basically, is trying to ride the wave of what happened last week for me. Nathaniel, how about you?
Yeah, well, first off, huge congrats, Mac, on the football game, but more importantly, on the official adoption of your boy. That's absolutely amazing. And Ernie, just to confirm, you actually used to live in the DFW area, right?
Yeah. Well, I lived there 20 plus years ago. So when I lived there, it was the ugly Texas Stadium. It looked like a Pinto version of a football stadium, kind of like the old Metrodome. You know how ugly that place was? Very similar. So
Got it.
the new Viking Stadium and the new Texas Stadium, much better improvements.
Yeah, yeah, man, that's awesome. Yeah, that's definitely a kind of a bucket list, I think, item for me as a football fan is to see that field at some point. Um, but yeah, so from my perspective, new in my world, as Ernie was kind of talking about kind of staying home and watching shows and stuff, it was extremely cold this weekend. Kind of tough to like actually do anything outdoors, which is a little bit painful, right? Like I really enjoy, as I've mentioned multiple times in this podcast, I love sledding with my kiddo, especially my oldest who's really into it right now. And when it's below zero, it's kind of tough to even begin to do that. But we did get outside a little bit, which I felt very happy about. Other than that, the biggest thing I think for me this weekend was getting out to the Infinity event. That was a ton of fun, and was very fortunate. We might as well just get right into it, right? I was very fortunate to go to an event that was very generous with the distribution of the promo cards. So for those who aren't aware of kind of how this Infinity event was run, there were 40 promo cards distributed to the stores who were going to hand out cards or run the event, right? And they could distribute those however they wanted. And so the store that I went to happened to have 11 players present at the Infinity event. And because they had 40 cards, they just said, we'll give everybody 3. So that was amazing, knowing that like no matter how I did, I was going to walk away with 3 of this really, really cool promo card. So that was really awesome. And I think from my perspective on just like playing Infinity again, Mac touched on the DLC, right? Like playing that, and Mac is a blue-red stan, and he played it like a violin and crushed with it. And I played blue-red, and after 2 rounds, I was kind of like, Oh man, my brain hurts. And so I was like, I don't know, because when I played Blue Red in the set 8 set champs, it was the Shark build. This was more of like your Hiram item loop type Blue Red build. And I was choosing going into Milwaukee between that and Amber Steel aggro. And I'd kind of been testing the waters a little bit with Amber Steel aggro, and it just gets to do unfair things. And I think this will be a theme actually as we talk about this kind of more throughout this episode. But what I found it does extraordinarily well is it gets to cheat a lot of ink out early in the match. In the first 5 turns, you get to cheat out a ton of ink. For example, your 1 cost Cinderella Ballroom Sensation gets to sing 3 cost songs. So not only is she, singing a song in general is already kind of cheating out ink, but she's a 1 cost singing a 3 cost. So it's like double cheating. Not like, you get what I mean. And so you get to do that right away. And then on turn 3, you get to play a lady and then play a 2 cost or 1 cost character for free. So you're getting to cheat out 1 or 2 more ink that way. And so you just can kind of avalanche the game really fast in like the first 3 to 5 turns because of this. And that was very good for me as far as my experience at the Infinity event. So it was really cool. We got to go this tournament of 11 people for the Infinity event. At the store that we went to had myself, Ryan, Connor, and Evan. Mac, I for some reason I thought you were making it. I don't know why I thought you were going to be able to make that event and fly to Dallas. But then we got the reminder like, oh yeah, just like I'm not gonna be there. So yeah, kind of sad that we didn't get the full 5. But one of the things I was really happy to see is our friend Evan, who we've talked about and we're hoping to get on this podcast at some point. He did really well. He made it to the final and he played me in the final, and he played a super aggressive purple, like an amber amethyst deck of his own creation that was like crazy fast, and it caught a lot of people off guard, and they didn't really know like how to manage his board, and before they knew it, the game was just over. And you can kind of do that, right? When you build some kind of not standard stock lists, if you're not like net decking and you're just making something entirely of your own that no one's really seen before, you can definitely catch people off guard. So that was really cool to see. And a good way to spend a Sunday that was extraordinarily cold outside, inside. We were in like the back of the store in like their it's a big kind of area towards the way back. So I kind of figured, right, insulated, right? But I was still like freezing back there. Like there was a point where I was like, I'm going to put my winter jacket on for the rest of the event because I was still like so frigid. But yeah, it was super fun, and we got to see lots of different decks. So, we got to see like the blue steel items, Thanos list, right? We saw some blue red was there. I played against a purple green like Maleficent themed deck. Like there was just all sorts of different stuff, which I think was cool, right? Like, and because I think when we tend to think about Infinity now, and Ernie, I'd love to hear your perspective on this, but like I feel like when we think about Infinity, the first thing that comes to mind is the 2 blue decks that are going to be amazing. Blue steel items, blue red, and then amber steel aggro, and then maybe to a lesser extent, Steel Song can kind of do some crazy stuff too, right? And it's sort of this like triangle of those 3, right? Like the more aggressive amber steel, the Steel Song kind of more control damage wheel, and then the 2 big bad blue decks, right? And then it's just sort of like, and then everything else. There's the discard list. There's like Ruby Amethyst. There's some purple green tempo. Like there's other things in there, but I feel like it's kind of, those are the kind of trifecta that everything sort of else like sits in between. And yeah, I felt lucky that we got to see a lot of stuff, because I think at the DLC, it was basically like, is it blue or is it amber steel aggro? And then like, that's most of what you would see that entire event. So it was cool to see some variety. And to be fair, like for a participation type oriented tournament, right? Like some stores I think did pack per win, but like nothing too crazy. I think it felt like there was less pressure to, like you had to have the most optimal incredible deck per se. But Ernie, I'm curious to hear your perspective, because you went to 2 events, how the Infinity weekend went for you.
Yeah. So the first one at VB, I took the easy road, and I just used, I was busy all week with work. So I kind of upgraded Elizabeth's Amber Steel aggro deck. And now I could see why she really likes that deck, because It is not fair to have both Nala and Piglet in the same form. That is just, I mean, there was people that, I mean, they doesn't even have a chance. And then that stupid pigeon Vinny, I mean, he's so infuriating for people because, and for me, even when I'm playing it, I just felt bad, right, as you're playing it. So I would agree with you that didn't have the greatest experience. I also played Red Blue at Milwaukee and I cheeseballed out really bad. Didn't have a great build, but yeah, you were right. It was either, I think I played six blue decks in a row, and it's very draw dependent. And then the one aggro deck I played was it beat me too. Right, so it was just like, oh my goodness, it was not fun. But what was good about this one is you're right. I saw a variety of different decks over the couple tournaments. Um, First of all, shout out, of late I've been kind of down on Ravensburger, but this was a great move on Ravensburger's spot with the promos and kind of pumping this up. I wish they would do some more of this kind of stuff. Maybe make open up a set chance where you could do infinity, let the store choose. I'd be interested to see a little bit of that so you could really promote this format. I do think that this format um, is undeveloped right now. It's people are kind of copying, pasting what they did before and maybe some minor upgrades. But I think if you had some real stakes at it, I think you would see there's a chance for some great creativity and some crazy combo decks with all the cards that are available, to be honest with you. The last tournament I did on issues needed to make Mac proud. It was blue red shark, and I'll tell you what, Cinderella in that deck, Mac, is phenomenal. You just cut out the Grammatallas, you put in the Cinderellas, and that deck is ridiculous. And then next stop Olympus. Oh my goodness. I played two different aggro decks, and that next stop Olympus just like they were winning and then they weren't. It was just like it was better than Be Prepared, to be honest with you. So, but yeah, I'm excited. I want to see more support for it, I guess is what I would say, guys.
Yeah, so you went to VB and Issues Needed for your two stores. I do want to shout out the store that I went to is Grey Duck Games in Maple Grove, Minnesota. They're a fantastic store. A lot of cool like games and toys in there as well. I have to be very careful about bringing my boys in because it is very hard to get them out of that store with all the toys. So yeah, Ernie, I'm glad to hear it went well. And yeah, I think I totally agree that there's a world where Infinity with the right support could really be fun as another variation of the game, right? We talk about how fun it is to have limited events, whether it be draft or sealed. And, we had that awesome trio event a few weeks back. Like these other formats in the game are really fun. And Infinity really feels like it should be the second most supported in theory, right, after Core Constructed. So I totally agree. I really hope they and to be fair, we do have 6 more months before the Infinity DLC. So I would have to imagine that we'll get something between now and then. I really hope at least. They did announce this quite early because I think this was in some ways like a makeup thing for like not giving out some cards to viewers of the Worlds tournament. So props to Ravensburger on kind of making us whole in that respect. Pun intended, absolutely. And, I think like they could definitely kind of hype up the excitement for an Infinity DLC by having more Infinity events. And so, yeah, I agree. I think it would be amazing. Like, this is totally like a shot. Like, no shot this probably ever happens, but it's like my dream state of like, be really cool to have an option where like the stores would maybe get like a set champs for like Core Constructed and they could hold a set champs like optionally for Infinity. That would be really cool, and it could be on a totally different schedule. So now you also increase the number of semi-competitive local events that you could go to, right? Because I think something that we find with how many stores we have in the Twin Cities and set champs being that singular month, a lot of them will happen at the same time. Whether because the stores aren't always going to be coordinating and whatever, right? So you have this like 3-week period or 4 where all the competitive local stuff is happening in that chunk of time. And then the other 8 weeks, it's just like you're kind of having fun with some limited stuff or whatever, right? Or maybe you're traveling elsewhere to go in a bigger tournament. That could be a great opportunity to do things that are Infinity related and they would have stakes to them where it's offset with the set champ schedule. I think that'd be really cool.
Yeah, I agree. The only take I have on this was just to reiterate what you were getting into, Nathaniel, is with the first, I guess, round of DLCs, having this major side event with Infinity, and then also this event. I'm very much on team, yes, continue doing this to lead up to what Indianapolis is going to be. I think it continues to get people thinking about this specific play style, because people come, I don't know what set's going to be released. That might be the Wilds set, is probably what that Infinity DLC will be. But once that's released, everyone's going to be practicing Infinity who's going to be in part of that DLC. So to kind of sprinkle it in now, to have people not forget about it, so that they're just, to kind of sprinkle off the rust now to lead up to that, I think is important, and keep it fresh, or at least not in the fully on the back of people's minds, somewhat in the front, to think about and keep it involved. Because I think that's kind of been the biggest downside to, I would say, non-competitive players that we've heard from feedback from the community. And I'll say Evan, our friend, is one of those, is it's hard for them to continue in the game because they invested so much with the first 8 sets. So it kind of bridges the gap for those individuals, this specific limited format. So I keep it up. Continue to have those events, and it doesn't have to be every set, but maybe once every other quarter, or once every 2 sets, So I'm glad it sounds like you had fun, or at least it was different in a good way. But now we're kind of getting into full practice mode for Core Constructed, set champs around the corner, right? But we also had some feedback on the community, right, on how is it we prepare for set champs. And Nathaniel, I think you're going to get into kind of the next topic we wanted to dive into.
Yeah, so the next one is, the question was really like, how do you get better at the game, right? So I think it's really fitting to have Ernie on for this one, because he is deck building for not 1, not 2, not 3, but 4 people sometimes, and practicing with them and working with them, right? So Ernie, having played with, all of your kids in this game, I think it's very apt to kind of hear your perspective on the different ways that you play through things. How do you get, what ways are you teaching, like optimal play lines and everything? I think one thing I have seen, there's 2 schools of thought. There's like the repetition thought of just like play lots, and then through repetition you'll get better. And then there's this other school of thought of like open-handed games, which is actually something, Ernie, I'm really curious if you've pursued this much, because I think the first time I ever saw this referenced was actually by DKP, where he talked about like making practice really efficient. So he would like not even just have open hands, but he'd take a step further and do like, what happens if I'm going to make myself have a bricked hand? So like I'm going to dig out enough cards to like be pretty bricked. How do I get out of that? And then, what happens when I have like the most amazing hand, and then when my opponent has the most amazing hand, and like changing those things up, and like how could you possibly find a way out if you're on the back right away. I think that is a particular skill set. I think that I go back to, right, that statement that Ryan said a while ago of like, don't tilt, right? Because I think we've all been there, right? You have this like gigabrick hand in some capacity, or something's just like not going, a bunch of uninks or whatever it is, but like just relax, right? And I think it's easier to sort of compose yourself if you've practiced this, if you've been here before, and hey, when I trained for this moment, these are the plays that I kind of tried to play out, like to my outs were these things, versus just kind of being like, well, ink and pass and whatever. And sometimes that happens, right? Like if you've got like a big control deck and you draw like 5, 7 cost or higher uninkables, like it might be a bridge too far. But I think a lot of times there is some window to get back into the game for most of those opportunities. It's just, I think, having the wherewithal to like understand what that is. And if you've practiced it, then you probably are more likely to play to that. So that being said, I think, Ernie, I'd love to hear like the different ways that you've practiced, because you've had a huge amount of success in this game over the last 2 years. We brag about you all the time in terms of like, being draped in champ mats, right? But like, what ways do you prepare as you gear up for set champs or any bigger tournament beyond just going to a fun locals?
Yeah, so it's a little bit of all of the above, to be honest with you. Our I think I shared some of this the last time I was on the podcast. I start the start of a new rotation, just trying everything, right? Not getting locked in on anything, just understanding the play lines of the different decks, trying new cards within an old deck, figuring, a previous rotation deck to see if it works out. Doing all that. So it's very loose in the beginning, and then it starts to tighten up as you get closer to this part of the season. Um, I build a gauntlet. So after, there's, what we're fortunate with is the information that's out there. And there's at least 2 to 3 tournaments a month that are going on. And you can see, Inkdex Inkdex is the one that has most of the good tournament information, but you can get some stuff from Dreamboard, .ink also. But I do a lot of scouting there, and I understand some of the things, copy paste some of it. Sometimes I put my own little flair on things too. But I build a gauntlet, right? And I don't, yes, I have most of the cards, but I'll proxy a lot of stuff. And until I know what I really want, there's no reason to invest in something that, it was cute, but you're not ever gonna buy it, right? But I proxy a bunch of stuff, and I have my gauntlet with me. So if I go to a league night and I try to play 2 league nights a week, I'm an older father. All my kids don't want to spend time with me anymore, right? So um, I get 2 league nights, one of them with Elizabeth, one by myself, and I play. And when I'm playing, I have my other decks with me. So I'm usually a pretty quick player. So we get done. Everyone's interested in playing more Lorcana. Come on, it's Lorcana. So I'll pull out one of the other decks and just try some things out against different decks. And that's really what I do early on. And then about this time until the start of the set champs, that's when I start practicing. It's either Alex is a great player. I practice with Alex a lot. Um, I've practiced with my son. So for example, on the 22nd, we're headed to Mexico for 10 days. We're visiting my wife's family. It's going to be great to visit family, but we're going to have a lot of downtime. So I have my gauntlet coming with me to Mexico. So my son and I will be in Mexico practicing for set champs and the next DLC. And so that'll be good grinding time, because what that'll teach me is really the fine tuning aspect. We're just going to grind a bunch of games and changing numbers and trying new card combinations. I'll really be set in my list. I'll probably have a top 3. I usually have my son's like, you should just commit already. Quit being a loser. Just commit, right? But I'm more of keep my options open, know what the field is, and really what's the challenge is if you think about this current rotation, every week there's a new number one, right? The meta is changing so fast and responding to the previous week's meta that you got to stay on top of it, right? So I do all of those things. And then when you talked about open hand, I do a lot of that with my son or with Alex, where we're talking about mulligans. We might even play a game. We might just open up the first hand, because you kind of know, oh, you got 1 drop, 2 drop, 3 drop, strength of raging fire. Okay, you should win this game, right? So we know how those things are going to play out, but it's really mulligan strategy, things like that. We do a lot of that. And then the last part is Discord. If you get in a good Discord channel and sharing ideas with people, just talking about the game on a regular basis. And I've noticed that you guys as a group do a good job of that. That helps you really identify things and keeps you fresh. So like even Mac, I have no fear that Mac's going to crush the set champs when he gets there. He hasn't been playing, but he's still been involved in the game. So a lot of pressure, Mac. I have pressure on you. All right. I'm giving you the juju. So those are the things we do today.
Yeah, I like it. So, I think it speaks to just like the level of effort, right? That like, you're committed to fine tuning and training. I think there's also some other really interesting ways that you can practice. One of the things that I did with Christian that was extremely impactful for me, particularly on a newer deck. So as part of his challenge, I was playing Steel Song during the set 8 meta prior to going over to Blue-Red. And there was an online tool. I can't remember how we did this, exactly the tool that we were using, but it was just like an alteration or mulligan tool. So like you weren't really playing a game. You're just going to have your deck list of 60 and you're going to get 7 cards, and then you're going to talk. And then what I did with Christian was I talked through okay, here's how I think I would want to mulligan, whether I'm on the draw or on the play. What does that look like? And just talking through some of those decisions was very interesting to me because it really got me thinking about like what are the most impactful cards specifically for like on the play and on the draw, and like where you could take a risk, maybe go like more aggressive on your mulligan if you were rewarded or punished for doing that, right? Like that was really interesting to me. And so I think, Ernie, you've talked about this before, right? Like in Lorcana, the concept of being able to alter your opening set of 0 to 7 cards is extremely powerful. That's not necessarily how other card games are played. They might just be like you get X number of cards and that's what you start with. Or it's like an all or nothing thing. So it's like you either keep that exact set of whatever you start with, or you have to pitch everything. You don't get to like curate your hand to a degree, right? It's like, oh, hey, these 5 are really good. These 2 don't really help me early, whatever, blah, blah, blah. Change out those 2. Like that's, in some ways, that's a little bit unique to this game. So I think just even practicing that can really help you set up for some success because you see how those decisions matter with using like a mulligan or an alter your hand tool, and you're just focusing only on that. I was surprised at actually how many things kind of came to light just from doing that for like 30 minutes with a deck list that I wasn't overly familiar with.
So a few things on that point. So uh, one of the biggest opportunities I see with new players or players that are trying to get to the next level is they don't take advantage of that altar. So they keep stuff, and even if you have like 7 okay or pretty decent cards, in most cases I'll still mulligan at least 1 card, so I get a shuffle, right? Because I want to shuffle up that you got. If you like your 7 cards really good, well, there's a chance that the top of the deck is going to be a bunch of stinkers. So I like to at least alter 1. That's just and there's no math to that. That's just a crazy Ernie-ism, and maybe doesn't work. And um, one of the big level pros would probably say that's ridiculous. But I do like to. You should be more aggressive than versus being conservative. So number one, that. Um, the second thing I would say is there's some good resources out there. So I don't know if you guys have watched that Alter Academy. That is a really good uh, video series on YouTube where Jay Baum will bring on different high level players, and they're known for a deck. For like, for example, recently Tiago is on there and he's talking about mulligan strategy for purple still. And so hey, and he's doing it. Okay, you're on the play, you're on the draw versus different matchups. One of the best things that you can do is don't net deck, and don't chase what the top deck is. Know your deck and know how your deck beats the different decks. That's the most critical thing you could do, and you do that by the repetition and stuff like that. But then the most important thing is knowing what you need a mulligan in the different matchups. And obviously there are things you're blind unless you're paying attention to what everyone's playing after the first round. You're really blind on what everybody's playing, especially in a big tournament. You should have a strategy going in blind. This is what I want for a blind hand, right? And then different matchups, it's going to be slightly different. There's some similarities in a lot of it, but while purple still, that's Mac. That's why Nathaniel does so good. The mulligan strategy for purple still is always the same: 1 drop, 2 drop, 3 drop, strength of raging fire. I mean, even Nathaniel writing it on his arm, he'll catch it every once in a while. So
Yeah, and what was there's a term that Christian sometimes uses for some of those play lines, and I think he calls it like a brain smooth deck or something like that, where it's just like it's just a smooth line. Yeah, and you know what? I think Ernie, I'm really glad that you brought that up because I actually had watched a feature like that where Tiago talked about like how many 3 drops are in that particular deck and how important Strength of a Raging Fire is, and how there were times where he would pitch a lot of cards if he had strength but no 3 drop, knowing that it's very likely he's going to get a 3 drop by turn 3. So like it was really interesting to see that, right? Because he's like aggressively trying to find that one card that really swings the matchup in his favor, knowing that like there's a lot of other, like there's only 4 strength of Raging Fires, but there's 16 or 20 3 ink characters that can sing it. So I think that was, I totally agree. I think that's great. I think there's some other ones in here as well, like Snapquester Mage does some voiceovers and some explanations for learning. So if you're interested in finding those, I think what we're basically saying is if you go on YouTube and you start looking for some of this stuff, it's not too terribly hard to find. maybe put a note out for us to put on social media, maybe a couple links to some of these good resources. So, folks have access to and can kind of see some of the best places to learn, because I think there's one school of thought here where you can just, for lack of better terms, beat your head into a wall and test and test and test without really knowing what you're doing, or you can do some learning ahead of time, and then the testing will be even more impactful because you kind of have a better idea of like, what does this want to do? What is this deck looking to do? Like I remember talking for the first time with Ryan about like, what does a blue deck want to do? And when I went into the set champs on blue red, I'd like had his voice ringing in my head of like, if you don't have ramp in your opening 7, you're gonna throw 7 back in. And it was like, as a purple steel player, that's like, oh my gosh, you almost never throw all 7 cards back in, right? So like, it was just such a different thing to me that like, that's how important ramp is to a blue deck most of the time, right? I'm also kind of dropping some hints about our next segment here. Yeah, I think the learning is great, and Ernie, I think you've showcased that more than anyone, that like with practice and finding the right resources, you can really up your game and perform at a really high level.
I want to make sure we take the 10,000 foot view too for like maybe more inexperienced players or players that maybe don't have as many cards. One thing that really helped me, at least very much so in the beginning when I got into this game, was not only know your deck, but even branch out further, know your play style. Like if you're a control player, just start studying those types of decks. If you're a mid-range player, then start, at least for a baseline, start to get an idea of what those decks want to do, or if you're an aggressive player. If you're someone that just likes to slap a lot of characters on the board as fast as you can, maybe you're an aggressive player, so maybe you should start studying cards and decks that want to do that, and then go from there. I think that's something that maybe can help newer players into the game understand what your playstyle is, and then start digging into those specific decks. Then the next step, to your point, Ernie, once you know what your deck wants to do, study what your opponent wants to do against you. I think that's really important in an efficient way to get better at the game, to take that next step too. Because ultimately, in general, you might know what you want to play turns 1, 2, 3, 4, but if you come up against a specific matchup, you might want to alter your turn 2 play. A good example, Nathaniel, with Purple Steel is, do I play Calhoun on 2 or do I play a different 2-drop, right? So it's those are kind of the things that you need to start thinking about when you're playing against different matchups, or if you're on the play versus draw, things like that. A perfect example that I experienced in Milwaukee was I was playing red-blue, very much control. As soon as you get to turns 5, 6, 7, that's ultimately when you start taking over the game. One matchup specifically that's really bad for me is Amber Steel aggro, especially when they get a lot of character down quick. Typically speaking, my deck wants to ramp on turn 2 and then play a 4-cost card on turn 3, typically speaking. For that specific matchup, the reason why I won 2 matches against Amber Steel aggro is I had to alter what my turn 3 play was going to be. I ultimately still ramped on turn 2, but I really started to look for sail on turn 3 to double ramp, ink twice. Then I still had 3 ink, and I would play a little Sisu or a Brawl to at least slow my opponent down. Then, especially if I played a Sisu, I'm inking to 6, and then I could shift big Sisu. That's why I did really well in that Infinity event, was understanding the matchups, especially with the matchups that are unfavorable against me. So truly understand your play style can get you into what decks you want to run. Once you know what your deck wants to do, then you can start diving deep into what your opponent wants to do against you. And hopefully you can start turning those matches more from the loss column into the win column. But yeah, ultimately though, it does take a little bit of practice, but starting to think about the game. And last thing for you before someone else can take over is, one thing we haven't talked about is something that's helped me is watching better players play the game. So things like streaming or like YouTube videos. Whenever there's a major event, I at least try and tune in for a couple hours, have it in the background while I'm cooking dinner, and just seeing what the feature tables are running and how they run specific cards and specific matchups. It doesn't take much to just pull up, a stream and follow a major tournament. So, and that's helped me a lot too. especially when they have commentators that are also very knowledgeable about the game, and they explain why the players are playing those cards in certain situations. So that I just want to give that 2 cents before we start wrapping up this topic and moving on to the next one. Is there anyone else that has more about how people could get better at the game?
I just want to double down on that point, Mac. That's a great point. There's been a lot of great content and a lot of great content creators. And to your point, like this weekend, I had a lot of time. Like I said, I was by myself, home alone, right? And it was very cold. Um, I was doing stuff around the house, but I had Twitch on and I was watching things, and it was actually distracting me. I was supposed to be doing work and I was standing there in front of the TV watching a big play or something like that. The good thing about a lot of these content providers, creators now, is they record all of this stuff too. So you can go back to YouTube or back on Twitch and see the replay of the stuff. And it, this is a good way to learn. If you want to, if you're an aggro player or you're a control player, there's a certain color combination. I guarantee there's content on it. Watch a video about that and you can see some of the tricks. They're on stream for a reason. They're usually pretty good players, or they've ran hot in that tournament and they have a good record. There's some things that you can learn. There's always some things you can learn, including what not to do sometimes. So that's also a valuable lesson too.
Yeah, I think the last thing I'll add on this too is, and Mac, you kind of touched on this a little bit of like as you practice something and maybe you have a favorite deck, right? This is actually something that I kind of recently discovered. Play against your deck. So like if you have somebody with you that can test and they can play your deck, or you use like an AI tool to kind of see what the AI does with the play lines that are available to it. And it's not always going to be perfect, but being able to see the cards, like if you got like maybe you're really struggling into a specific ink combination, or it's a hard nut for you to crack. You play with that deck and play against yours and see what cards feel really good in that matchup for you as the opponent, or what cards could your deck be playing more that are really actually quite good in this. And the example I'm thinking of, right, is like I didn't really realize as a purple steel player how important a card like Palace Guard could be into Blurple, because it's a big, it's like a Daisy type character, right? It's a 1/4 that like they don't really want to waste their vanish removal on that because it's a 1-drop. But it's a 1/4, so they're going to probably have to swing into it 2 different times, most likely. And that's really annoying for a Blurple player. So I found that out because I tested against my list using Blurple from like myself, not necessarily being the best purple player ever, but like seeing, oh wow, like that card actually had a lot of value for a 1-cost character, right? So I think that's another way too of like, you can play your deck into lots of different stuff and you can do open hands and everything, but play against yours and like see what cards are particularly impactful against you on this other ink combination, whether it be something you're struggling against or doing well against, like, and see how those cards can really swing the game. That being said, there are specific cards that tend to swing a lot of games, and I think that's our next segment. It's the most impactful cards of the current meta. So last week we talked a little bit about what cards are pretty impactful for like an Infinity meta that we would expect to see. And that, of course, is always going to be changing, and I'm sure so will this list. But as of the middle of December 2025, in our Whispers meta, I would love to hear from you guys first, and then I'll give my list. But just your top 3, maybe most impactful, or could be even fringe, like, is this a problem card in the current meta? Ernie. Oh, yeah, Mac, you go first. Mac.
Yeah, I'm going to go first because I've had the least amount of practice, so mine should go pretty quick. I am sticking to blue, as most of you all know, as a blue stan for sure. Still, one of the most impactful things if you run a blue deck is ramp on turn 2, whether that's Tipo or Sail. Ernie, you have a good perspective on, you tend to lean towards Sail the Azurite Sea, but regardless, more so like a 10,000 foot view perspective on this, ramping on turn 2 for those types of decks are critical to get to your 4-cost card on turn 3. That's been the case since these 2 cards have been released, really. And it continues to be such a crucial play because with blue, and not only blue, but the combination of decks that go with blue, there are a lot of good 4-cost cards that go seamlessly right into your turn 3 play. Specifically, you have the new Cinderella. There's a big one. I know technically you would prefer to play the Webby directly on turn 2 as a shift, but Webby is another 4-cost character that's new. If you run Blurple, you got Genie on turn 3 that you run into. So you got a lot of really good 4-cost cards for this ramp on turn 2. That's what it utilizes. So that's first and foremost, as a blue player, I wanted to get that out there. The other one that I really like, and it's a little nuanced though, I really like the new Goliath legendary, but you got to play it at the right time. I've been finding that in this crazy purple amethyst meta, and we'll get into that discussion a little bit later, Goliath is a card that if it stays on the field is kind of a little bit of a counter to the ample card draw that these purple decks seem to be getting. It forces, your opponent can still cycle their deck pretty good, but it forces them to like choose the 2 best ones at the end of their deck and discard the 2 based on the Goliath, effect. So what I'm trending into the Sapphire Steel decks, that's become a crucial card against a lot of these Amethysts decks that we see running rampant. And then one that isn't on our list, but I want to make sure people don't lose sight of it, is the Mean, Malicious, and Scary song that is in Emerald. If you see that card, you have to be ready for the Prince Philip shift or just play in general. Because usually, in my experience, it doesn't always happen, but if that card is played, your opponent is typically setting up that Prince Philip to just wipe your board. So something to look out for. But also, it's just a put damage. It gets through a lot of these other resist and other kind of deal damage effects. It's just put a damage counter on there, something that gets around a lot of the traditional ways of quote-unquote dealing damage. So those are the 3 cards that I wanted to highlight from my perspective in my limited testing so far.
One follow-up to that too, Mac, it also gets around ward. So it gets around both the dealing damage and resist characters, but because it is a put on all, it also gets around that sometimes very annoying ward keyword.
Yep.
Great point.
So Mac, real quick, you had several cards you named there. What would be your top 3 of the cards you listed off? And I know you have limited play lately, but
yeah, my top 3 for me personally, my play style, it's the turn 2 ramp into a 4-cost card. So that would be it. And then the Mean, Malicious, and Scary, the put damage on is just such a unique way that we're starting to see this game transition from the dealing damage and things like Calhoun getting around that, and because that can be scary early game. I think the put damage is such a unique effect that is underutilized in the game now, but I can see more cards coming out like that in the future, just because they've just introduced it. So I put that at 2, and then the Goliath for me in my top 3, I'll put that in 3 for right now, just because it counters that crazy Amethyst draw. It forces your opponent to just choose only 2. Even if they're able to draw 6 in a turn, you still have to choose 2 at the end. So I'll put that in that order.
Cool. One thing I'm going to do a public service announcement real quick for Goliath, right? So I was watching the stream as I was doing work this weekend, right? And there was a blue steel player versus a blurple player, and he played Goliath, which is a great answer into blurple because it really negates a lot of their card draw. And it was crushing me to watch the blurple player play because he's holding on to cards that he wanted to play later. And the way to get around Goliath is you need to ink everything you can ink every turn, and you need to play all your cards and draw 2 narrow cards every turn. That's the way you keep up with Goliath. That's the way Blue Steel gets ahead with Goliath, is they're doing that exact thing, and then they have a ton of ink and they have a big board. So you have to do the same thing. It doesn't matter if you're Blurple, Purple Steel, whatever. Ink every turn and play as much as you can. That's how you get around Goliath, and let them feed you. Don't get rid of the Goliath.
Yeah,
Let
utilize
them
the
feed you.
draw effect rather than feeling bad getting the discard effect. I think that's kind of the big thing with Goliath.
Yeah, and that means you're going to ink some things that you normally wouldn't ink, but that's what you have to do. That's what
Yep.
you have to, because otherwise they're going to beat you with card advantage. All right, going into my top cards. No particular order. Alsa 5 drop. What is that one called? I don't even know. Alsa
Fifth Spirit.
Fifth Spirit. There it is. I was gonna say Spirit of Winter, but that's the big A
Big
drop.
Elsa.
Genie Wish Fulfilled. Strength of a Raging Fire. The Hades duo. Purple and blue. So one each. Clarabelle. I do have the two cost ramp, right? Which most cases sale is probably the better one, but there are examples where Tipo is a better card. If you're playing blue green, for example, you're setting up your turn for Clarabelle. You want to play the Tipo over the sale because you don't want to have extra cards in your hand. Um, and then also, you mentioned it earlier, Nathaniel, against aggro, just getting that body in there that can punch. The shirtless boy does some good punching against aggro decks for sure. Then I have after the two cost ramp, I have Cheshire Cat, which oh my gosh, Mac, you haven't been playing. That Cheshire Cat is Ballad is really not getting played in Blurple. It's getting played, but it's pretty much gone now. You play Cheshire over it just because of that repeatability and the fact that if it bounces back, you get that as card advantage, or if it gets put into your Inkwell with Hades, you get all of that into your Inkwell. It's just oh goodness, it's repeatable. Moving damage is ridiculous for sure. I have Doc, and then the last one I have is Tramp. Actually, a 7 cost Tramp. Um, and I mean, I think Dogs is a tier 1 deck, and when I think about what makes Dogs really great, it's that darn 7 card Tramp. To be honest with you, so if I was gonna have to rank my top three, I think it is Alsa is the best card right now in the format. If you're playing purple, you're playing 4 Alsas. If you're playing purple, you're playing 4 Genies, right? And if you're playing still, you're playing 4 strengths. So I think those are the three best cards. And as I wrote this down really quickly at the beginning of the show, I forgot Dumbo on my list. Didn't even make my top 10. So
Yeah, hot take, I guess, right? Because Dumbo is still extremely good, particularly in grindier matchups, right? It can really spiral the card advantage. You guys have basically said all the cards that I would have said. I think the one exception that I would include to that list, Ernie, is Clarabelle. And I think Clarabelle herself is as good and impactful on the meta as she is because we're in a purple meta. Because it's, you talk about like Goliath being a powerful purple answer because it evens the playing field from a card disparity or card advantage perspective that purple tends to want to do. What does Clarabelle do? It basically says I can dump my hand and play this, and then I just get to draw all the cards that you have. So it's like the anti-purple card in a lot of ways, which leave it to green to do that, right? That's green's thing is always like the anti-something. So I think I would include Clarabelle. Ernie, I talked about this with you, right? Like the way that the blue-green deck, and I'm glad that Mac mentioned Malicious, Mean, and Scary, because the way that deck is now constructed is it kind of feels like it has these two ways to attack you, particularly if you're a purple player, in the ways that it kind of encourages you to dump your hand because there's this looming Clarabelle threat. But then if you dump your hand and play all these characters out, the shift Prince Philip could always come down too. And that's really scary because then they wipe your board. And so if you overcommit to the field, you lose that. If you overcommit to your hand, they'll just Clarabelle and they get a big hand. So it kind of feels like a darned if you do, darned if you don't in a way, depending on how those kind of first few turns can play out. But I think Clarabelle is as valuable as she is right now because she is the sort of anti-purple card advantage card that green gets to include in their list. And yeah, I mean, do I love hearing all these purple and steel characters that you just mentioned? Absolutely. They're amazing. I will say, I think we haven't quite figured out maybe the total best way to play her, but I do think there's a world where this Demona can really do some damage, the new legendary Demona. Again, shocker, purple card. but like the force exert of your opponent's entire board, so you get to do the trade ups is pretty big, and it's a body, and you get to draw 3, so it's potentially this top end card for a purple steel deck that they always like they really want to do, right? Because then you can I always call her like the big doc, right? Because you just like dump your whole hand ahead of playing a Demona, knowing that like you're gonna draw 3 cards then if you have her as your last card. So it's an interesting one, but I just don't think it's quite as impactful as the other ones. I think, to your point, Ernie, the Genie on, if you're a ramp deck on turn 3, but the Genie into an Elsa combination is absolutely incredible. And the fact they're both evasive, Elsa's inkable, right? And they're wider bodies as well, with being a 4 willpower and a 5. And the force exert from Elsa Fifth Spirit is just incredible. So yeah, and I think the other part too that I want to talk about with the force exertion is that it allows you to start opening up play lines for the Cheshire Cat. So that's another card that, again, it's move 2 damage and put it on something. So like the Cheshire Cat is really scary. If you've got like a Calhoun on the field, it's not really that safe if there's a Cheshire Cat, because they can just move 2 damage onto the Calhoun and, it one-shots that. So a very interesting card, and I think, again, it does feel like they just keep printing a lot of really good purple cards. I wasn't totally sold on just how good the new Hades is until I started playtesting with it and against it. It puts you into some really tough decisions, and if it's played at the right time, it can be a pretty tremendous card in any purple list. So maybe not the super, super aggressive ones, but yeah. I think, that being said, we've talked a lot about Amethyst. Do we have an Amethyst problem, guys? Is Amethyst a little too good right now? Because I think if we start thinking about, like, what are the top decks, right? I think Purple Steel has to be in there. I think Blurple probably is there as well. And then I would put Blue-Green as that would be Emerald Sapphire as the third one that I would put as, like, your top decks. I think those would be my top 3 as of right now in my mind. Shocker, I picked 2 purple lists.
I'd
What are
also,
you guys' perspective?
I agree with the 3 that you listed in that order. I would also add the Dogs deck, so that's Amber Emerald. I think is a top tier deck, and you can build that one. You can do the Circle of Life version. You can do the Chroma Dogs, or you can do the what is it, the Under the Sea version. You can do a mix with that. And when you do the Circle of Life, you can also do your favorite Mac, Malicious, Mean, and Scary with it. So it's pretty ridiculous. So
Yeah, I think though too, ironically, the cards that we haven't talked about, another shocker, no Ruby, but with Ruby, it's at least better than it was last set. Like, there are some Ruby Am decks that have had success, mostly due to that 2-cost Diablo. That is just kind of a beefcake for a 2-cost card. And then the Headless Horseman tends to do very well, but specifically paired with purple, right? So, like, it utilizes these really strong Amethyst cards. To your point, Nathaniel, of do we have an Amethyst problem right now? Even the quote-unquote worst color in the game right now can find success when it's paired with this very strong color in Amethyst. So, to your point, I do think it's too strong. And why it's too strong, I haven't had enough time to play test, but from what I've been reading, it's that Genie Elsa playline. Like, it's almost unstoppable, quote unquote, right now. I'm sure there are ways to kind of manage it and deal with it, but to have Genie replace itself and then Elsa force exert, allowing those two with pretty good willpower, pretty good stats, to have both of those swing into a critical character on your opponent's field, that can be devastating for a game. And then you're just able to heal it. Sure, Bell isn't played, the Accomplished Mystic isn't played very much, but there are a couple decks that then play that on turn 6 to heal one of them, or you just Cheshire Cat it with playing that and then instantly boosting it that turn. So it's like, what are you going to do? Like, you can get rid of a card, start healing, they're evasive. Your odds are your opponent can't deal with it. I know that just based on what I've been reading in a lot of the Lorcana community, it's that combination, those two cards. The fact for a year now, those cards have been staples in Amethyst decks. I think people are starting to feel old with those two cards. So I'm curious to see. I don't think it's going away this set. I think this set is pretty much like, yes, it's those two cards. It's the Amethyst show. But I'm curious to see how it changes come sets 11 and 12 and how we're able to deal with those two cards. Because when those cards did come down, I just want to make this point. When those cards did come down, it was because the instant answer at that stage in the game was either Along Came Zeus, or because it was able to get rid of Elsa right away, or if you were playing against a ramp deck, specifically the shark build, if as soon as you start turning those sideways, the shark eats those for lunch, and then good luck trying to deal with the shark. So, and we just don't see shark right now. So I think that's another a big reason why those cards tend to see a lot of play, 4-ofs in any purple deck that you see. But that's just kind of my 2 cents as someone who hasn't been able to practice as much at this stage in the game. Your thoughts on that?
No, I think
Yeah,
those are great. I'll go you first, Nathaniel. Sorry.
so I was gonna say I think those two cards are certainly they can be problematic, especially because they are both evasive. So to your point, you don't get to swing back on them. I think the Amethyst kind of potential problem we're talking about is the fact that, like, for a couple sets now, Amethyst Steel and Amethyst Sapphire have been, kind of pushed towards the top. And I think people are, fine, sure, there's 2 purple decks towards the top. But I think what we're seeing now is, like, Amethyst is so good, it can pull up the color that's so bad, being Ruby, and Ruby Amethyst can now be good because Amethyst is so good. We just saw a huge tournament get won by Amber Amethyst. Now, granted, Zansayed is a very, very good player, and if he brings a deck that people haven't really seen before, it can catch people off guard. That's particularly powerful. But you're seeing, again, I think it was 47 Amethyst cards with like 13 Amber cards that would kind of finish kind of the top little pieces to this thing that he was trying to do. But again, Amethyst is really pulling the weight here. And then now you're even seeing some Amethyst Emerald decks, which actually I just sent to our friend Evan, where they can kind of go a couple directions too, with either going more of the mid-rangey, kind of like Malicious Me and Scary Prince Philip shift line. But again, they're using tons of Amethyst cards, or they can go like a more aggressive line, and they're using the power of the Amethyst card draw to just keep slamming down characters really fast, and just they don't get out-resourced because Amethyst is the card draw color. I think, there's 5 color combinations. If 2 of them are like towards the top, it's kind of like, okay, sure. But when it feels like it's so good that, like, maybe you don't have 5 tier 1, but like the other ones are viable because that one color is that good, that might be a little bit of a problem. And I'm saying this, it hurts me to admit, as an Amethyst player for the last year, but I think it's true. Clearly has gotten a little bit too far in front, and I think a lot of it does have to do with the card draw, but also the emphasis on evasives. And that's, I think, why Dumbo became a little bit of a concern in a way. It's a little bit slow, I think, but the fact that that's also evasive, and then it turns your evasives that some decks just can't do anything really about them. They get to also, like, get lore and draw a card, and like just like even more steamroll that card advantage is just crazy. So yeah, Ernie, sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you there. I think you had a comment as well.
Yeah, no, and you kind of covered some of my point that I was going to cover. I do think we have a purple problem, and I think the purple problem is the color identity. You kind of mentioned it. So the color identity for purple is card draw, and I mean they have so much great card draw that they're not even playing all of it. I mean, think about last rotation where you had Yzma that was getting played in all the top decks, and Yzma's not even getting played right now, right? And you mentioned that the green purple or emerald amethyst kind of burn deck that's going on right now. They're playing Show Me More, right? And Amethyst Comic Con, which are card draw cards also, right? And so I think, and Ravensburger's been good as far as the play design. They've been good about changing and shifting. And I think what they need to do is provide card draw mechanics for the other colors. Maybe not every color, but that'll open it up for other color combinations to be better Yeah, Clarabelle can't be the only answer for green for card draw, right? And if you think about last rotation, that Amber only had Rapunzel. But why was Rapunzel a $50 card for most of that first rotation? Because it was only Amber card draw, right? And so they need to answer that, and they need to not give purple so much card draw that it's an embarrassment of riches there. And to Mac's original point, I do think that Elsa and Genie are probably the prime problem. And I agree with you, Mac. I think so. Next set will be set 11, which is about the same time last year when they banned Hero. So I could see if they're going to do a banning. I think that's when they would do it is next set, and it's only going to get worse, right? Because to your point, Hades is a card draw card. Demona's a card draw card, right? It's just they're going to have to do something because if you're playing purple, you're going to play 4 genies and you're going to play 4 Elsas, right? And because I have 4 people that live in my house, I guess how many sets of each of them I have right now, right? 4 sets of each, which is ridiculous, right? So, um, I do. I think the answer is they do need to ban something probably next set, and then they need to fix the purple color identity so it's just not always purple. Because if you think about it, even last set or last rotation, red purple was probably the best deck. If you look at all the way across, it was the best deck. And why was it the best deck? Because it was a card advantage deck. Yet red was strong enough that red blue was competitive with it, and I loved red blue, and they totally depowered red. I don't know why. Um, and they didn't do anything to purple. It just makes me scratch my head. But I'm sure it'll all balance. It works that way, right? Purple's getting its day in the sun. I'm sure there'll be some other color next rotation. If you
Yeah,
think
I
about
was
it,
wondering when you were going to bring up the bad B word in ban, because that's something too that's been discussed on multiple forums in the community, discussing those 2 cards and what to do about it. So I obviously, as the red blue player in set 7, felt it for sure. As soon as those discussions started happening, I was getting nervous. And after it happened, sure, we had our little 5 stages of grief with Hiram, but I would say about 1 to 2 weeks removed, it made a lot of sense why they did it. And I think it was just reiterated to the fact when I played Red Blue in Milwaukee, I remember maybe I was between round 3 or 4. I went up to Nathaniel and I was just like, there's no way at turn 10 I should still have 7 cards in my hand with this deck. It just does not make sense. So in hindsight, it makes sense why they did it. Now, as you guys who are more purple players than I am, do you feel kind of the quote unquote unfairness that maybe I felt back in set 7 with my red blue deck? Do you kind of see it, or at least understand why these conversations are starting to come up with these cards? Nathaniel, I'd like to get your thoughts first because of your love of purple the last probably 5 sets.
I think what's interesting is there's kind of 2 schools of thought here. I think you can point to Elsa and Genie being kind of the early kind of steamroll engine of the purple kind of power block. But I think that the bigger problem here is when it was a blue problem, quote unquote, it was a singular card for the most part that felt like it was the biggest issue. And that was the fact that it felt like Hiram was like almost a guaranteed draw 4 because he was such a wide body. So like 6 willpower was just crazy, right? And you had very little way of actually answering that. Now, Genie is hard to answer, but you could conceivably answer that like relatively easy enough early in the game. I think what we're kind of saying is it's harder to point to a singular card the same way that you could with Hiram. And Fortisphere felt a little bit random to me. I get why they did that. But I think it started with the rat. Whereas like purple being the card draw color right now feels like the bigger issue than like a specific card, I guess. So I would be sad if they banned those 2 cards, but if that did even the playing field a little bit, I think that would be a positive thing for the game. I just think it's not like Genie isn't on the same level as Hiram, right? Like that, the things you could do with a Hiram on board were crazy in like when he was doing his thing with, popsicle, pop it, get to do it again when he quests the next turn. Like that's just like so overwhelming. So I don't know. That's I think where I stand on it. It's not as easy to point to a singular card.
I would disagree with that point. So, so first of all, Mac, like you, I was a red blue player really last rotation, and I've been more into purple this rotation. Um, but I do think what Genie does. So Genie's not. I would agree with you in that Genie is not as powerful as the Rat. Right? Hiram was, man. He was Thanos for sure. Right? And he'd assemble his gauntlet and he would make it all happen. But where there's similarities between the Rat and Genie is there's a sense of inevitability. So if you don't answer the Hiram right away, and you don't answer the Genie right away, you lose. And you think about the matches that you've lost in the mirror or against Blurple, Nathaniel. What did you lose to? Who drew more genies? Right? I swear you've mentioned that. They drew more genies. Oh yeah, that's going to happen, right? So I think that is why Genie needs to go. Is that inevitability? I also think that the fact that you're immediately jamming four of him and four of Elsa, you're really, if you think about when they banned Hiram and they banned the what was the other Fortisphere, everyone was kind of doom and gloom initially, but the format actually got better, and you
Totally.
still had wide open, and you still had all that, and part of it was you got more creative on how you were going to do things. And so I think the same thing will apply here, where you remove Genie, you remove Elsa. Purple still has plenty of phenomenal cards, right? But now they got to think about how they design it going forward, and that just creates a brand new meta, which is exciting to me from that perspective. And then the other thing is, I would say I wouldn't just do Genie and Elsa. I think you also have to do Sail the Azurite Sea. So if you think about it, when they banned Hiram, they also banned Fortisphere because they knew that the second they pulled out Hiram, the blue steel Kiwi decks, so that was the blue steel aggro version of the deck. That was going to be the best deck because you could play Bal on turn one, no problem, all the time with eight one drop items like that draw you a card. So they banned it for that reason, and it really made it balanced. Because could you imagine Kiwi with after post rat ban, it would have been ridiculous, right? And so that's the way they
Yeah.
balanced it out. And I think if you take out Genie and Elsa, you have to do something in the blue decks to kind of create that balance too. And I think Sail is the answer, because I do think if you took Sail out, you still have Tipo and you still have one jump ahead, that still gives you the 8/2 ramp spells, but they're less selective, they're less powerful than Sail, if that makes sense.
It does make sense. And I think what you're getting at, Ernie, is the fact, so on the sale point, is the fact that you get to, with sale, you get to ramp, and there's not this additional cost to ramp your Inkwell because you get to replace, like it's a card draw and an opportunity to ramp. Whereas like Tipo, yes, you get to put an extra card in your Inkwell, but it doesn't replace itself then. So like you're paying a cost. One jump ahead, you're like playing the action, you're ramping another thing from, so like you're dwindling your hand in the interest of widening your Inkwell. So I think that's a fair point on that. And you are right. I did specifically say, as part of the Fabled meta especially, it was like if one player drew Genie, Elsa, Dumbo, and the other person got like just a Dumbo or just one of those, it was really hard because when you have evasives and they don't, that's a huge problem. And I think we've talked about, all these different playlines that you can do with that, and the fact that Genie replaces itself is obviously amazing. And yeah, I mean, you also talked about the fourth card. I think I literally pointed to, there were 4 cards last set in all these purple steel matchups that you would have, or any purple type of match, but particularly in the purple steel ones, it was like those 3 cards. So Dumbo, Genie, Elsa, and Strength of a Raging Fire. If one person saw those and the other person didn't, it probably wasn't very close. So yeah, you're right. I think there's certainly some cards, and I think what we're seeing here is there comes cards at times where it just kind of is a little bit too unfair, whether it's cheating out extra ink in ways, right? Like, and that's where, the tramp is so good in those dogs decks, right? Because you get to play this really huge character, filter your deck, but you get to play him at like this huge discount. So you're cheating out ink that way. But there's some balance there versus, I think Genie Elves is a play line that I think people would be frustrated if they had to deal with that for another year. But I suppose we'll see. We'll have to find out. I'm a little nervous, but there's so many other options, to your point, Ernie, that we would survive as purple players.
We would survive. Iago's still really good. So
Yeah, I agree. And like, quite frankly, during some playtesting, there have been times where that is a really good card to play on, whether it's a ramp deck on 3 or, even another deck on 4. It's still a really good character. Okay, well, I think, Ernie, we should probably wrap this one. I know we've gone a little bit longer than we anticipated. So with that said, I just want to thank you for joining again, as always, Ernie. It's amazing to have you on here. We love hearing your thoughts. Such a kind person, but also such a skilled person at this game that you always bring so much to the table. So thank you for coming on once again. Hope to have you on again soon. To those of you who are listening, you can find us on Instagram and YouTube for video content, and you can also find us on Spotify or Apple Podcasts in terms of your podcast consumption. But until next time,